The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Santa Rosa, California, silencing the evening chatter as Nora Fletcher crumpled to the ground, her hand clutching at her bloodied shoulder. It was June 1875, and she'd just become the latest victim of Maxwell Kingsley's brutal attempts to silence those who dared stand against him. "Get her!" A voice barked from the shadows of the saloon where moments ago Nora had been calmly sipping her tea, mentally rehearsing her testimony for tomorrow's trial. Blood soaked through her calico dress as she dragged herself toward the nearest alleyway. The pain was blinding, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through her body. But she couldn't stop. Tomorrow, Maxwell Kingsley, the man who'd murdered her brother in cold blood, would face justice, but only if she survived to testify. From across the street, Heath Ackerman had been securing his horse outside the general store when the commotion erupted. At 31, he'd seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. After 7 years riding with the Texas Rangers before moving west to California, he recognized the sound of trouble when he heard it. "Stay down," Heath commanded as he drew his Colt revolver and moved swiftly toward the fallen woman. 2 men emerged from the saloon, weapons drawn, scanning the street for their victim. With a practiced hand, Heath fired 2 warning shots into the air. "Back away, boys, unless you're eager for an early grave." The would-be killers hesitated, reassessing their odds against the tall, broad-shouldered cowboy, whose steady hand and cold stare suggested he was no stranger to gunfights. "This ain't your business, mister," one of them called, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Heath's gaze never wavered. "I'm making it my business." After a tense moment, the men retreated into the saloon, but Heath knew they'd be back with reinforcements. He holstered his gun and rushed to the wounded woman. "Madam, can you stand?" he asked, kneeling beside her. Nora's eyes, a striking shade of green, were clouded with pain but determined. "I think so," she managed, though her face was alarmingly pale beneath her auburn hair. "We need to get you to a doctor and fast." Heath gently helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight as she swayed unsteadily. "No," she protested weakly. "They'll look for me there. I need to testify tomorrow. Kingsley, he killed my brother." Heath's jaw tightened at the mention of Maxwell Kingsley, a name that had become synonymous with corruption throughout Sonoma County. The cattle baron had been terrorizing smaller ranchers and businesses for years, but witnesses had a troubling habit of disappearing before trial. "First, we need to stop this bleeding," Heath insisted, guiding her toward his horse. "Then we'll figure out how to keep you alive until tomorrow." Nora stumbled, nearly falling. "I don't think I can ride." "You won't have to do it alone," Heath assured her, lifting her onto his horse before mounting behind her. With one arm securely around her waist, he urged his stallion forward at a gentle pace, acutely aware of her sharp intake of breath with each movement. "The courthouse is in Healdsburg," Nora murmured, fighting to stay conscious as they rode. 20 miles north." Heath nodded, mentally calculating their options. "We can't take the main road. Kingsley's men will be watching it." "Who are you?" Nora asked weakly, her head resting against his chest. "Heath Ackerman. I run a small horse ranch outside of town." "Nora Fletcher. I own the millinery shop with my brother." "Hold on, Miss Fletcher," Heath said as he turned his horse toward a narrow trail leading into the hills. "I know someone who can help us." The evening shadows were growing long as they approached a small cabin nestled among the redwoods. An elderly man with a long, white beard stepped out, rifle at the ready before recognizing Heath. "Bringing trouble to my doorstep again, Ackerman." The man called out, though his weathered face broke into a concerned frown when he spotted Nora. "She's been shot, Doc. Kingsley's men. The old man, not an actual physician, but a former Army medic known simply as Doc Wilson, cursed under his breath. "Bring her in." Inside the sparse cabin, Heath gently laid Nora on a narrow bed as Doc gathered his supplies. "Bullet went clean through her shoulder," Heath explained. "She's lost a lot of blood, and I'm guessing she can't go to town for proper treatment." Doc asked, already knowing the answer as he washed his hands in a basin. "She's the witness in the Kingsley trial tomorrow. If she doesn't make it to that courthouse, a murderer walks free." Doc's expression darkened. "Kingsley's reach is long. Getting her to Healdsburg alive won't be easy." He turned to Nora, who was drifting in and out of consciousness. "This is going to hurt, miss." As Doc cleaned and dressed her wound, Nora gripped Heath's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. She didn't scream, only a few whimpers escaped her tightly pressed lips. Her resilience impressed Heath, who had seen grown men howl from lesser injuries. "She's strong," Doc remarked as he finished bandaging her shoulder. "But she's lost too much blood for a journey tonight. She needs rest." Heath paced the small cabin. "Kingsley's men will be combing every inch of this county by morning. Then you'll have to leave before dawn," Doc said, mixing a powder into a cup of water. "This will help with the pain and fever, but she'll be weak. You'll need to take the mountain trails slower but safer." Nora's eyes fluttered open, focusing with effort. "I have to testify," she insisted, her voice barely audible. "My brother, James, deserves justice." "You will," Heath promised, a determination forming within him that went beyond mere duty or chivalry. There was something about this woman's courage that stirred something inside him, something he thought had been buried years ago alongside his wife and infant son. As night fell, Heath took first watch outside the cabin while Nora slept fitfully. Doc joined him on the porch, offering a tin cup of coffee. "What's your stake in this, Ackerman?" the old man asked. "Kingsley's not a man to cross lightly." Heath stared into the darkness of the surrounding forest. "Maybe I'm tired of men like Kingsley thinking they can buy or bully their way through life." Doc studied him over the rim of his cup. "Or maybe you've got your own ghosts." Heath didn't answer. 5 years had passed since influenza had claimed his family in Texas, driving him westward in search of a new beginning. He deliberately kept to himself, focusing on building his horse ranch and avoiding entanglements. Yet here he was, risking everything for a woman he'd just met. Before dawn broke, Heath gently woke Nora. Her fever had subsided, but her complexion remained worryingly pale. "Time to go," he said softly. Doc had prepared provisions and fresh bandages. "Change the dressing tonight," he instructed. "And keep her warm. Shock can be as dangerous as the wound itself." Heath helped Nora into a spare shirt of Doc's, large enough to fit over her bandages, and wrapped her in his own coat despite her protests. "You'll need your strength," he told her, lifting her onto his horse once more. "The journey won't be easy." Doc handed Heath a revolver to add to his own. "Take care, both of you. That girl's testimony could change things around here for a lot of people." As they set off in the gray light of early morning, Nora leaned heavily against Heath's chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "My brother was all I had left. I can't let his killer go unpunished." "What happened?" Heath asked, guiding his horse up a steep, narrow trail that few knew existed. Nora's voice grew stronger as she spoke, as though her determination was physically reviving her. "James and I came west from Boston after our parents died. We used their savings to open the millinery. It was doing well, too well, perhaps. Kingsley wanted our building for his new banking venture, but James refused to sell. And Kingsley doesn't take no for an answer," Heath added grimly. "One night, James caught Kingsley's men trying to set fire to our shop. There was a fight, and Kingsley shot him, right in the street." Her voice broke. James lived long enough to name his killer to the sheriff. I was the only one who heard it. Heath's arm tightened protectively around her. The sheriff's a good man. Why didn't he provide protection? He tried. The deputy assigned to me disappeared 3 days ago. Nora's body tensed. Kingsley owns half the county, Mr. Ackerman, but not the judge in Healdsburg. That's why the trial was moved there. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, picking their way through rugged terrain that would deter pursuit but slowed their progress considerably. By midday, Heath could feel Nora's strength flagging, her body growing heavier against him. We need to rest, he decided, helping her dismount near a small creek. Nora sank to the ground, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. We don't have time. You'll never make it to Healdsburg if you collapse, Heath countered, filling a canteen with fresh water. Drink this. Then I'll check your wound. She complied, watching him care for his horse with practiced efficiency before turning his attention to her. His hands were gentle as he examined her bandage, his expression betraying concern at the fresh blood seeping through. It's reopened a bit, he said. We need to change this dressing. Nora looked away, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks as Heath carefully removed Doc's oversized shirt from her shoulders. He worked quickly, respecting her modesty while tending to the wound with surprising tenderness for a man with such calloused hands. How did you learn to do this? She asked, trying to distract herself from both pain and proximity. 7 years with the Texas Rangers teaches a man a thing or two about field medicine. Heath applied a fresh bandage. My wife used to say I should have been a doctor instead of a lawman. Your wife? Nora asked, noting the shadow that crossed his features. She and our son died of influenza 5 years ago. His voice was matter-of-fact, but Nora didn't miss the grief that still lingered in his eyes. I'm sorry, she said softly. Heath helped her back into the shirt. It was a lifetime ago. They ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack before continuing their journey, now following the creek northward through a dense forest. The going was slower than Heath would have liked, but the cover provided by the trees gave them some security. As afternoon waned, they came upon a small clearing where an abandoned trapper's cabin stood. We'll rest here tonight, Heath decided, noting Nora's increasing pallor. But the trial, she began. Is tomorrow afternoon, Heath finished for her. We're making good time, all things considered. You need proper rest if you're going to be strong enough to testify. The cabin was dusty but intact, offering shelter from the dropping temperature. Heath quickly built a fire in the stone hearth while Nora sank onto a rough wooden bench, fighting waves of dizziness. How did you end up in Santa Rosa? She asked as Heath prepared a simple stew from their provisions. He worked methodically, his movements economical. After Caroline and Thomas died, there was nothing left for me in Texas. I drifted west, worked as a ranch hand until I saved enough to buy my own place. I breed horses now, nothing fancy, just good, solid stock. Do you miss being a ranger? Heath considered the question. I miss the purpose sometimes, the clear line between right and wrong. He handed her a tin cup of stew. But I've seen what power does to men, how it blurs those lines. Like Kingsley, Nora murmured. Men like him exist everywhere, Heath said. They just wear different clothes and use different weapons. As night fell, Heath changed Nora's bandage again. The wound looked better, no signs of infection, though the area remained angry and red. Her fever had returned, however, concerning him. Try to sleep, he urged, spreading his bedroll for her near the fire. I'll keep watch. Despite her exhaustion, Nora found sleep elusive, her shoulder throbbing in time with her heartbeat. She watched Heath through half-closed eyes as he sat by the cabin's single window, his profile illuminated by moonlight. There was a stillness about him that spoke of inner strength rather than complacency. Mr. Ackerman, she called softly. He turned immediately. Heath, he corrected. After all we've been through, I think we can dispense with formalities. Heath, she repeated, testing the name. Why are you doing this? Risking your life for a stranger? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Because it's the right thing to do, he finally said. And because I know what it's like to lose someone and feel powerless to do anything about it. Their eyes held for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits shaped by loss. Rest now, Heath said gently. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. Dawn broke with a heavy mist rising from the forest floor. Heath had dozed off briefly, waking with a start to find Nora already up, moving gingerly but with more strength than the previous day. Your color's better, he observed, relief evident in his voice. Nora managed a small smile. I feel more myself, thank you for, well, everything. They set out as soon as light permitted, following game trails that wound through increasingly mountainous terrain. The going was slow but steady, and by mid-morning, Heath estimated they were less than 10 miles from Healdsburg. We'll need to approach the town carefully, he said as they stopped to water the horse. Kingsley will have men watching the roads. Nora nodded, scanning the wilderness surrounding them. Do you think they've followed us this far? Possibly. Kingsley won't give up easily, not with his neck on the line. As if summoned by his words, a rifle shot cracked through the air, sending splinters flying from a tree trunk inches from Heath's head. He reacted instantly, pulling Nora to the ground behind a fallen log. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his revolver as 2 more shots kicked up dirt nearby. How many? Nora whispered, pressing herself against the decaying wood. Heath peered carefully over their shelter, catching movement among the trees ahead. At least 3, maybe more. Another volley of shots pinned them down as the attackers began to circle. Heath returned fire judiciously, conserving ammunition while trying to gauge their opponent's positions. They're trying to flank us, he muttered. We can't stay here. Nora's hand closed around a heavy branch. I'm not going to die cowering, she said, determination hardening her voice despite the fear in her eyes. Heath's admiration for her courage grew. When I give the signal, run for that cluster of rocks, he instructed, pointing to an outcropping about 30 yards away. I'll cover you. Before she could protest, he rose to one knee and fired rapidly, forcing their attackers to seek cover. Now, he shouted. Nora ran, clutching her wounded shoulder as Heath laid down a barrage of covering fire. She reached the rocks safely, but as Heath prepared to follow, a bullet grazed his thigh, causing him to stumble. Another shot narrowly missed his head as he rolled behind a tree. Heath, Nora called out anxiously. Stay there, he commanded, pressing a hand to his bleeding leg. The wound was painful but not serious, a shallow furrow across his outer thigh. The shooting paused, followed by a voice calling out. Give up the woman and you can ride away, cowboy. Kingsley just wants what's his. She doesn't belong to anyone, Heath shouted back. And she's going to testify. Laughter echoed through the trees. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Don't die for a stranger. Heath used the distraction to move between trees, working his way toward Nora's position. When he reached her, she gasped at the blood staining his trousers. It's nothing, he assured her, though the pain was intensifying. But we need to move. They're trying to delay us until reinforcements arrive. What about your horse? Nora asked. Heath shook his head grimly. He bolted during the shooting. We go on foot from here. They retreated deeper into the forest, using the rocks and dense underbrush for cover. Heath limped slightly but maintained a steady pace, alert for pursuit. They traveled for nearly an hour before he was satisfied they'd lost their trackers. We need to bind that leg, Nora insisted when they finally stopped to rest. Heath didn't argue as she tore a strip from her petticoat and wrapped it tightly around his thigh. Her touch was gentle but sure, her focus absolute. "You'd have made a good nurse," he remarked. "I helped at a field hospital during the war," she replied. "After our father died at Antietam, Mother and I volunteered." Heath studied her with new appreciation. "You've seen more than your share of hardship." "As have you," she countered, finishing the bandage. "Yet here we are, still standing." Their eyes met, and Heath felt something stir within him, a warmth he'd thought long extinguished. In this remarkable woman's presence, the walls he'd built around his heart since Caroline's death seemed suddenly less impenetrable. The moment was broken by the distant sound of riders. "They've found our trail," Heath said, helping Nora to her feet. "We need to keep moving." They continued north, now following a steep ridge that offered a view of the valley below. In the distance, they could make out the town of Healdsburg, tantalizingly close yet separated by difficult terrain and determined pursuers. "If we can reach that road," Heath pointed to a winding trail visible below them, "we'll be within sight of town. Kingsley's men wouldn't dare attack us openly there." They began their descent, the going treacherous on the rocky slope. Heath's injured leg threatened to buckle with each step, while Nora's wounded shoulder limited her ability to steady herself. When she slipped, crying out as pain shot through her injury, Heath caught her one-handed, nearly losing his own footing in the process. "We make quite a pair," she said with a strained laugh as he steadied her. "The best kind," he replied with unexpected warmth. "The kind that keeps going." By late afternoon, they reached the valley floor, but their progress had been too slow. The courthouse would be closing soon, and they were still miles from town. Heath's expression grew increasingly grim as he calculated the time. "We won't make it before nightfall," he admitted reluctantly. Nora's face fell. "The trial continues tomorrow, but what if Kingsley's men find us before then? We can't keep running, not like this." Heath scanned their surroundings, his mind working rapidly. The sound of an approaching wagon caught his attention, and he pulled Nora behind a large boulder just as a farm cart came into view on the nearby road. "Wait here," he instructed, limping toward the road with his hand raised in greeting rather than holding his weapon. The elderly farmer pulled his team to a stop, eyeing Heath's blood-stained clothing warily. "You look like you've seen better days, mister." "Indeed I have," Heath agreed. "My wife and I were attacked by robbers in the hills. She's hurt, and we need to reach Healdsburg urgently." The farmer hesitated, understandably suspicious. "There's been talk of Kingsley's men roaming these parts, hunting a witness." Heath tensed, ready to retreat, but the farmer spat disgustedly to the side. "Kingsley cheated me out of 40 acres 2 years back. You running from him?" When Heath didn't immediately deny it, the farmer nodded. "Thought so. Get your wife. I'm heading to town myself." Relief flooded through Heath as he helped Nora to the wagon. The farmer, who introduced himself only as Johnson, covered them with empty grain sacks in the back of his cart. "Keep low," he advised. "There's patrols on this road." They traveled in uncomfortable silence, every jolt of the wagon sending fresh pain through their injuries. Twice they heard riders approach, and each time Johnson greeted them casually, explaining he was bringing feed to the livery stable. Each time, the riders moved on without searching the wagon. As dusk settled, they entered Healdsburg. Johnson directed his wagon down side streets, avoiding the main thoroughfare where Kingsley's men would most likely be watching. "The courthouse is there," he said, pointing to an imposing brick building ahead. "But it'll be closed now. Judge Harmon stays at the Occidental Hotel. That's where you'll find him." "We're in your debt," Heath said as he helped Nora from the wagon. Johnson waved away the thanks. "Give Kingsley what he deserves. That's payment enough." The Occidental Hotel stood across from the courthouse, its windows glowing warmly in the gathering darkness. Heath and Nora, bedraggled and bloodstained, drew startled looks as they entered the lobby. "We need to see Judge Harmon," Heath announced to the desk clerk. "It's urgent." The clerk stared at them dubiously. "The judge isn't receiving visitors." "Tell him Nora Fletcher is here to testify in the Kingsley trial," Nora said, stepping forward despite her exhaustion. "Tell him Kingsley tried to have me killed." Something in her voice, perhaps the quiet dignity with which she spoke, despite her obvious suffering, convinced the clerk. He disappeared upstairs, returning moments later with a tall, silver-haired man whose stern countenance softened at the sight of their condition. "Miss Fletcher, I presume," Judge Harmon said. "We feared the worst when you didn't appear for preliminary proceedings this morning." "Kingsley's men ambushed her in Santa Rosa," Heath explained. "They've been hunting us since." The judge's expression darkened. "Come upstairs immediately. This hotel is secure. I have deputies posted." In the judge's suite, they recounted their ordeal while a doctor was summoned to tend their wounds. The judge listened gravely, occasionally making notes. "Attempted murder of a witness adds considerable weight to the case," he observed. "But your testimony about your brother's dying declaration remains crucial, Miss Fletcher." "I'll be ready to testify tomorrow," Nora assured him, though she swayed slightly from exhaustion. "You both need rest," the judge insisted. "I've arranged adjoining rooms with guards at the door." The trial reconvenes at 10 tomorrow morning. After the doctor redressed their wounds and left them with laudanum for the pain, Heath escorted Nora to her room. At the door, she turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I wouldn't be alive if not for you," she said softly. "How can I ever repay such a debt?" Heath gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender against her skin. "There is no debt between us, Nora. Some things are done simply because they must be done." She caught his hand in hers. "And some things are done because the heart demands it," she whispered. "I've known you barely 2 days, yet I feel as though—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Heath understood her hesitation because he felt it too, this unexpected connection, forged in danger but growing into something deeper. "Get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." He pressed a chaste kiss to her forehead before retreating to his own room, both of them aware that something significant had shifted between them. Morning brought renewed determination as they prepared for court. A seamstress had been summoned at first light to provide Nora with a suitable dress for her testimony, while Heath was loaned a clean shirt and trousers by one of the deputies. "You clean up well, Cowboy," Nora remarked as they met for breakfast in the judge's suite. Heath's smile reached his eyes for the first time since they'd met. "As do you, Miss Fletcher." Judge Harmon interrupted their exchange. "We've received word that Kingsley has arrived at the courthouse with a considerable entourage. He seems confident despite the additional charges." "He thinks he's untouchable," Nora said bitterly. "Men like that always do," Heath agreed. "Until they're not." They were escorted to the courthouse under heavy guard, the streets lined with curious onlookers who had caught wind of the dramatic developments. Inside the packed courtroom, Maxwell Kingsley sat at the defense table, a powerfully built man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit, flanked by 2 attorneys and several supporters. His expression hardened when he saw Nora, alive and prepared to testify. His eyes darted to Heath, taking in the stranger with evident calculation. The trial proceeded with formal charges, including the new count of attempted murder of a witness. When Nora was called to testify, she walked to the stand with quiet dignity, despite her bandaged shoulder visible beneath her borrowed dress. For the next hour, She recounted the events surrounding her brother's murder with unwavering clarity, how James had caught Kingsley's men attempting to burn their shop, the confrontation in the street, and her brother's dying words naming Kingsley as his killer. "And are you certain, Miss Fletcher, that your brother specifically named the defendant?" the prosecutor asked. "I am," Nora affirmed. "James said, 'Kingsley shot me.' Those were his exact words, spoken to both myself and Sheriff Collins." When Kingsley's lawyer cross-examined her, attempting to undermine her credibility by suggesting grief had clouded her memory, Nora remained steadfast. She then described the ambush in Santa Rosa and the pursuit that followed. "And this man," the lawyer pointed to Heath, "conveniently appeared to rescue you." "There was nothing convenient about it," Nora replied evenly. "Mr. Ackerman risked his life for a stranger because it was the right thing to do, a concept that might be foreign to your client." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, silenced by the judge's gavel. When Heath took the stand to corroborate Nora's account of the attacks, Kingsley's attorney attempted to paint him as an opportunistic drifter, hoping to curry favor with a vulnerable woman of means. "You were a Texas Ranger, you say, yet you left that position. Why?" the lawyer pressed. "After my wife and son died, I needed a fresh start," Heath answered honestly. "And you expect this court to believe you intervened purely out of civic duty? That you have no personal interest in Miss Fletcher or her property?" Heath's gaze was steady. "I expect this court to recognize that sometimes, sir. A man simply does what's right because it is right." The testimony of Sheriff Collins from Santa Rosa, who had taken James Fletcher's dying declaration, sealed Kingsley's fate. As the jury deliberated, Heath and Nora waited in a small anteroom, the tension of the past days finally catching up with them. "Whatever happens," Nora said softly, "James would be proud that I made it here, that his killer faced justice." Heath took her hand in his. "And you should be proud too. Many would have broken under what you've endured." "As should you," she replied. "Not many men would have done what you did for a stranger." Their eyes met, and Heath found himself leaning closer, drawn by something more powerful than the attraction he'd been fighting since their journey began. Their lips had barely touched when the door opened, announcing the jury's return. They entered the courtroom hand in hand as the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts, including murder and attempted murder of a witness. Judge Harmon sentenced Maxwell Kingsley to hang, denouncing him as a man who had used his wealth and influence to terrorize an entire community. As Kingsley was led away in shackles, he turned to Nora with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Not while I have friends." "It is over," Heath countered, stepping protectively beside her. "Your reign ended the moment you underestimated this woman's courage." Outside the courthouse, the spring sunshine seemed brighter somehow, the weight of fear finally lifting from Nora's shoulders. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Heath's expression grew thoughtful. "That depends. I have a ranch that needs tending, horses that need training." "And I have a shop with no one to run it," Nora replied. "Though I'm not sure I can return to Santa Rosa even with Kingsley gone. Too many memories." "Perhaps," Heath ventured carefully, "you might consider a different path. Healdsburg seems like a fine town." "It does," she agreed, a smile playing at her lips. "Though I've also heard good things about horse ranches." They walked slowly through the town, neither in a hurry to part ways, both aware that what had begun as a desperate flight for survival had evolved into something neither had been looking for but both now cherished. "It's too soon to make decisions," Heath said reasonably. "We've known each other under extraordinary circumstances." "True," Nora conceded, "but sometimes extraordinary circumstances reveal what might otherwise take years to discover." He couldn't argue with that logic. The past few days had stripped away pretenses, showing them each other's true character in ways that peaceful times rarely allowed. In Nora, he'd found a courage and resilience that matched his own. In Heath, she'd discovered a man whose quiet strength and unwavering moral compass had awakened feelings she'd thought buried alongside her brother. "Stay," she said simply. "At least for a while. Let us discover who we are when we're not running for our lives." Heath's smile was answer enough. In the weeks that followed, Nora's wound healed steadily, as did Heath's leg. They remained in Healdsburg while the legal aftermath of the Kingsley case unfolded, including the dismantling of his criminal network. Heath telegraphed instructions to his ranch hand for the care of his horses, finding himself increasingly reluctant to return to his solitary life. Nora, with the proceeds from selling her shop in Santa Rosa, purchased a small millinery in Healdsburg. The work kept her hands busy while her heart and mind explored the growing connection with Heath. They dined together each evening, sharing stories of their lives before fate had thrown them together, discovering shared values and complementary differences. 1 month after the trial, Heath received word that a fire had destroyed part of his stable. Though no horses were harmed, it was clear Kingsley's remaining associates were sending a message. "I need to return," he told Nora that evening as they walked along the river. "To secure what's mine and make it clear I won't be intimidated." "I understand," she said, though her heart constricted at the thought of his departure. "When will you leave?" "Tomorrow." Heath stopped, turning to face her. "But I'd like to return, Nora, to you." The simple declaration hung between them, filled with meaning beyond the words themselves. "I'd like that very much," she replied softly. Their parting the next morning was bittersweet, tempered by Heath's promise to return within 2 weeks. Nora threw herself into her work, establishing her new shop and building relationships within the community. Yet each night, she found her thoughts drifting to a certain cowboy and the future they might build. 12 days after his departure, not that she was counting, the bell above her shop door jangled. Nora looked up from the hat she was trimming to find Heath standing there, his lean frame silhouetted against the afternoon sun, hat in hand. "You're early," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "I found I had incentive to conclude my business quickly," he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. That evening, as they strolled beneath the oak trees that lined the town square, Heath explained how he'd confronted the men who'd burned his stable, making it clear that any further retaliation would be met with the full force of the law. He then sold half his stock, keeping only his best breeding pairs. "I'm considering relocating my operation," he said carefully. "Somewhere closer to Healdsburg." Nora's heart quickened. "Is that so? There's good land here, good water for horses." Heath stopped walking, turning to face her. "And a compelling reason to stay." In the golden light of sunset, he looked younger somehow, the lines of grief that had marked his face when they first met now softened by something that looked remarkably like hope. "Nora," he began, his usual confidence giving way to uncharacteristic hesitation. "I know it hasn't been long, but I believe some things don't require years to know with certainty." She waited, barely breathing, as he continued. "When Caroline died, I thought that part of my life was over. I never expected to find someone who could make me feel this way again." He took her hands in his. "I'm not a wealthy man, but I have enough to offer a good life. If you'd consider—" Nora silenced him with a kiss, rising on tiptoes to press her lips to his with all the feeling that had been building since that night in the judge's anteroom. When they finally parted, Heath looked momentarily stunned before breaking into a wide smile. "I take it that's a yes to a question you haven't quite managed to ask," she teased gently. Heath laughed, the sound rich and free in a way she hadn't heard before. Dropping to one knee there in the town square, heedless of passers-by, he held her hands firmly in his. "Nora Fletcher, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? To build a life together that honors the past, but looks toward the future." "Yes," she said simply, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yes, I will." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in the town's whitewashed church. Judge Harmon officiated while Doc Wilson made the journey from his cabin to stand as Heath's best man. Several of Healdsburg's citizens, who had embraced Nora as one of their own since the trial, gathered to witness the union. As autumn painted the vineyards surrounding their new home in russet and gold, Heath and Nora settled into the rhythm of shared life. The property they purchased lay halfway between town and the foothills, offering ample pasture for Heath's horses and a comfortable farmhouse that Nora transformed with her skilled hands. She maintained her shop in town, enjoying the independence it provided while Heath established his breeding operation on cool evenings. They would sit on their porch, watching the sun set behind the coastal mountains, sometimes speaking of their past losses, but more often planning their future. The trials they had endured separately and together had taught them the value of each day, each moment shared. "You ever regret it?" Heath asked one such evening, his arm around Nora's shoulders. Testifying against Kingsley, all that followed, Nora considered the question seriously. "I regret James's death every day, but standing up to Kingsley, never. It was the right thing to do, no matter the cost. Like rescuing a stubborn, wounded woman determined to reach a courthouse," Heath suggested with a smile. "Exactly like that," Nora agreed, returning his smile with one of her own. "The best decisions often come disguised as the most difficult ones." As winter yielded to spring, their happiness grew with the news that Nora was expecting a child. Heath received the news with joyful disbelief, holding her as though she might break before dropping to his knees to press his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he whispered. "Your mama and papa are waiting for you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Nora reduced her hours at the shop as autumn approached once more. Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1876, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined spirit. "James," Heath suggested as they gazed at their newborn. "After your brother." "James Heath Ackerman," Nora amended, watching as her husband's eyes filled with emotion. As their son grew, so did their ranch and reputation. Heath's horses became known throughout Northern California for their quality and temperament, while Nora's millinery flourished, catering to women from San Francisco to Sacramento. They added to their family 2 years later with the birth of their daughter, Caroline, named for Heath's first wife in a gesture that acknowledged the past while embracing their future together. 5 years after they first met, as they celebrated James's birthday with friends and neighbors gathered at their expanded home, Sheriff Collins from Santa Rosa arrived with news. Maxwell Kingsley had died in prison, removing the last shadow from their happiness. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Heath and Nora stood together on their porch under a canopy of stars. "It's finally over," Nora said softly. "Truly over." Heath nodded, drawing her close. "We've come a long way from that day in Santa Rosa." "A journey I'd take again," Nora said with conviction, "if it led me here to you." In the years that followed, their love deepened through shared joys and sorrows, through the everyday miracles of raising their children and building a life together. Their story became something of a legend in Sonoma County, the witness who survived against all odds and the cowboy who risked everything to see justice done. But for Heath and Nora, the greatest story wasn't the dramatic flight to the courthouse or the trial that followed. It was the quiet, daily choice to love each other, to honor their pasts while writing a new future together one day, one moment at a time. And on cool evenings, long after their children had grown and started families of their own, they could still be seen sitting together on their porch, hand in hand, watching the sun set on another day of the life they had built from the most unlikely of beginnings.